Hey, I'm Maoli Studio and I've been learning 3D for a bit more than 2 years now. In this video, I wanted to document my journey of trying to learn rigging and animation, so I could give you all of the tips I wish I knew when I first started to learn rigging and animation. I had two ideas in mind, which include rigging a face and rigging a body. For the rig of the body, I had this idea in mind where I wanted to mix a real video footage of me and a 3D character. And for the face, I wanted to learn for the first time how to rig a face and try to do a lip sync. I knew I had a very long way to go because I've always found rigging and animation very hard because of course I'm neither a professional rigger or animator, and when I tried a few times to rig and animate some of my character, I always find myself fighting against deformation, clothes problem and stuff like that. Okay, so first I knew I needed to learn all of the basic stuff. So I made a list of all of the things I needed to learn and understand, which are having a good retopology, placing the rig in the right way, way painting, and animate. Since I already knew how I wanted my character to look like and how to model her, I had one thing already done. But what I knew was that topology would be super duper important. So in my case, I wanted to use a character that I have made in the past. I knew that the topology of this character may not be very good for rigging and animation. So I started to look for references and tutorial on how to actually model a character in order to rig and animate it. I wanted to know what was the best topology I could make in order to have a good deformation when I will animate my character. So I looked for references where I should place the loop so my face would deform well. And for the rig of the face, what I learned is that usually the loops will kind of follow the muscle of the face. So the loops around the eyes will be round, around the mouth it will be kind of oval, and for the jaw it will simply just follow the shape of the jaw and stuff like that. When creating a character, you have few possibilities, and two of them are sculpting and poly modeling. If you are sculpting your character, you have to do retopology right after. It's a step you can't miss, because otherwise it will be impossible for you to animate your character because it will be too much for your computer to calculate. Then you have poly modeling, and it's the same method I use in one of my tutorials. With this method, basically you start off pretty simple with a simple shape such as a cube or a sphere or even just a plane, and you're going to build your character faces by faces while taking a good care of how the topology is looking. So here is how the topology of my character look like at the end. One of the best tips for me while doing retopology is to add a plane. Then you're going to place it in front so you can see better with what you're working on. Then I'm adding first a shrink wrap modifier. I'm selecting my sculpting face as the target. And by the way, I usually hide all of the other elements so it doesn't disturb me. Then I also turn on the snap tool so it sticks better to the face. And then faces by faces, I'm going to build my topology like that. There are lots of free resources on internet like on YouTube or Pinterest, but don't forget also to check the Blender Studio website because they have lots of different free resources. It can be great to take a look at these and understand how retopology have been made. You can even download their free character to see by yourself how the face or the body is deforming. Before moving on to the rig part, let's just sum up the tips I would give for retopology. First tips, I always start by placing the important loops, so around the eyes, the mouth, from the nose to the mouth and chin area. This way you can first concentrate on loops that will be important for the deformation of the mesh and then build the rest of the topology around that. Tips number 2, I suggest you keep quads as much as you can, and by that I mean keeping your faces square, so each one have 4 vertices, and avoiding triangles, so only 3 vertices. Tips number 3, that it's quite obvious and that can also apply to the other parts of the video, but it's just to make some backup copy of your work just in case you need to rework on a previous version of your character. Tips number 4, try to achieve an harmonious topology. A rig is supposed to be kind of harmonious, so you don't want like huge faces and next to it very small faces. We're trying to have a harmonious look at the end. Okay, now that I have my character and that my topology is quite good, let's move on and add a rig. The most useful rig tutorial that I follow was one from Killian. I'm pretty sure you already came across his channel and his tutorial. And this tutorial was clear and simple. It was exactly what I was looking for. So for me, it's the perfect tutorial to follow if you want to achieve a simple rig. And for the face, I mostly follow a tutorial by CGDive, but I also used a lot the documentation on the Blender website, the one that I've talked earlier, because it helped me a lot to understand where I should actually place my bones depending on the face I'm making. And a thing that I've learned the hard way while setting my rig is that you have to be very careful on what bones you are moving, because some bones, if you are using the Rigify add-on like I do, have connection between them, and if you are moving one bone from its like connection, when you will try to generate the rig, you will have some error. So if you have this kind of error and you don't want to start over your rig, here is the method I used in order to correct this. All you have to do is go into the object data properties. In viewport display, I display my armature as stick so I can see better. And now if you look in the area of the error, you might find some bones that are disconnected. To reconnect them, all you gotta do is go and turn on the snap tool and choose vertex. Then on the front or side view, you're gonna bring this little circle and bring it where it should be, and do this to every bone that could be disconnected. Most of the time it's around the mouth, the eyes or the jaw when we move the bones to adapt the rig to our character. So for the rig of the face, all I did was being careful on where I'm placing my bones, and I also did the rig of the body, which in my opinion was a lot simpler. Now that my rig is aligned to my body, I make sure to hit Ctrl A and apply the scale of all of my objects on the scene that will be affected by the rig. And now I can generate the rig. I then select both the new rig and the character, and I'm parenting them to each other. Let's be clear, this was the easiest part. I already knew the worst part was going to be the way painting. So once you have set up your rig to your character, sometimes the deformation won't act like they should. So you have to redo the way paint part. Unfortunately, I don't have any magic tips for this part. The best thing that worked for me at the end was just to try my rig, do some normal and some crazy movement for my character and see where the deformation don't work or don't deform like it should. Like for the shoes, for example, when I moved the legs, the shoes didn't even bother to move. So all I have to do was to click on my shoe, then go into Wayne Paint mode. Then on this panel on the right, I looked for the shoe vertex. I click on it, then I simply add weight where I want it to deform. When it comes to way painting, the more red it is, the more weight it is, and so the more deformation it will have. And in the contrary, the more blue you have, the less weight it will have, and so less deformation. So the way paint of the body was pretty simple to do at the end of the day, because the automatic way did a pretty good job to some parts, so I didn't have to redo a lot of things. And my character wasn't very complex, so I didn't have any complex deformation. So it kind of saved me a lot of time. But the face was a different story. The face I've created is just a stylized version of a normal face. There isn't as much as details, but it also kind of worked the same way as a normal face. Which means that there are lots of deformation around the mouth, the nose, the eyes, and the cheek, and all of the muscle that forms the face. So at this point I already knew that the rig of my face wasn't going to be perfect at all, but I still try my best to correct the weight paint part, and just like I did with the body, I just work with the flow. I try to make some expression for my character, see where I could correct some of the weight paint part, and just work little by little like that. For this character I decided to separate all of my elements because it was just simpler for me to weight paint each part. A useful shortcut you have when you are weight painting is Alt Q. It's the same shortcut as when you are sculpting. It allows you to switch between different mesh super quickly without having to go to the object mode all over again. I trained a few times like that to rig and then unrig, paint and then unpaint my character, just to test different methods and to see what is working the best for me. Of course, I will spare you all of the hard times I had trying to understand why my rig isn't working, why it's not deforming well and stuff like that. But what we have to keep in mind is that I end up using the Rigify add-on on Blender because I felt like it was the right thing for me at that moment. I then did the entire weight painting on the body and on the face, moving bones to see how it reacts, and so on and so forth until I'm happy with the result. Okay, time to recap all of the tips for rigging and weight painting. Tips number 1, I found that for me hitting Ctrl A and applying or transform for the rig and the character before applying and generating the new rig will make sure that my rig is actually applying well. Tips number 2, try to first concentrate on a simple body and character without caring too much on clothes or accessories or hair, just to get a good understanding of how everything is working. Tips number 3, I recommend using the Rigify add-on because at the end of the day I'm not a professional rigger, and making a rig from scratch for me for a real first project like that will be way too ambitious. But a good thing to do to understand how rigs are working is to practice on small rig, like first maybe just try to make a rig for an arm or leg, learn how constraint and stuff like that are working. It will help you understand what you are doing, and I think it will also help you understand when your rig isn't working and how to fix the problem. Tips number 4, for the weight paint part, the only tips I can give you is to actually try your rig and see where you think there are some deformation problem and fix it in the weight paint tab, switching with Alt Q between mesh to save you some time. So now that I had my character and that it was rigged, it was time for animation. I already knew that one of the most important things in animation is to have a reference. It can be a video of you, it can be a video clip from, I don't know, YouTube, from a movie, whatever. Because not only it will save you tons of time, but it will also help you to achieve a more realistic animation at the end. So for the animation of the body of my character, I already had this video footage of me posing, so I knew that I wanted my character to do the exact same thing that I do in the video. I first simply added a plane that I used as a floor, and I make it as a shadow catcher. I also needed to have a transparent background, so I checked transparent into the film setting. Now I go into my camera setting and I'm going to add a background image and click on movie clip and choose the reference I want. And now you can see your video reference right through your camera. Now it was time to actually start to animate. And the same way you would do if you were going to model or sculpt a project, we're going to start by a blocking phase, which means here that we are going to block out the main movement, the main poses. So this first phase is going to help us focus on the important movement of the animation. And once you have done this, you can start adding keys between your main poses and just work your way into your animation. I personally like to turn on the automatic key setting so I can just work freely without having to think every time to add a keyframe manually. And that's basically it for the animation and the rig of the body. Now we can move on to the face rig. And since I wanted to do a lip sync, I knew that the best way to do it was to have a pose library. So just like we have done with the body, we have to make sure our face is well rigged and have correct deformation. Once I felt like everything was quite well rigged, I started doing different poses. For this, we're gonna open a few different tabs so we can see clearly with what we are working on. For the animation of the face, I also looked for different reference for the face, depending on the sound the character will make, so A, B, P, T and stuff like that. So I just kept the reference right beside me and start creating poses depending on the sound. Once we have all of our poses, we're gonna open another tab to add the sound we want to lip sync on. And now, still with the automatic key setting, we're going to apply the correct poses to each sound from the audio. Overall, the trickiest part is that you have to have a model that has a nice topology, so the rig will apply well to your body and so the animation will be smooth enough. And I know mine isn't perfect at all, but let's keep in mind it was the first time I tried to rig like that and mostly to animate. Okay, lastly, let's sum up all of the tips I could give for the animation part. Tips number 1, like we said earlier, keep a reference all along. It will save you so much time and it will also just help you achieve a more natural result at the end. Tips number 2, start with a blocking face to know the important pose and build the rest of the animation from that. Tips number 3, work with key poses. I personally find that it saved me tons of time because I know my character is going to do the same poses multiple times. So with key poses, I didn't have to redo the same animation every time. So this was how I tried to rig and animate for the first time. I hope this video have given you the energy to try something new. Even if it looks scary and that you might be very bad at it at first, we always have to start somewhere, and maybe that somewhere could be after this video. I know it's a little bit different from what I usually do and from the tutorial I have made, but I thought it would be fun to share with you the process of learning something new. The next video will probably be a sculpting tutorial as some of you have requested it, so yeah, see you soon.